Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Meng Zhang. Coming up in this edition, US President Donald Trump has urged Hamas to accept a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel has agreed to finalize the terms of the truce. The US Senate has passed President Donald Trump's tax and spending bill after over 24 hours of deliberation. The legislation now heads to the House of Representatives for final approval. And scorching heat waves are gripping Europe, with countries including Italy, Greece and Switzerland issuing urgent alerts. We start off in the Middle East. US President Donald Trump has urged Hamas to accept a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel has agreed to finalize the terms of the truce. Trump says mediators from Qatar and Egypt were delivered a deal. Hamas has said it is willing to free the remaining hostages in Gaza under any deal to end the war. However, Israel says the war can only be ended if Hamas is dismantled. Trump is hopeful that the deal can be reached next week. He will meet visiting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at White House on Monday. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved on Monday officially that he will be visiting the White House next week for a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. While in D.C., the Prime Minister will also be meeting the Vice President, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense. Two main issues will top the agenda. One is Gaza, the most important one, and the second one is Iran. How it will be treated from now on. Israel, of course, wants to make sure that strong pressure is maintained. The United States wants to engage again in diplomacy. Another issue on the agenda will be the expansion of the Abraham Accords with Syria, as it seems being the next country to join to sign some sort of a normalization pact with Israel. Not a peace accord yet. It's not as if diplomatic missions will be open in Syria and in Israel. Many issues there to be treated. All of that as a Prime Minister will head to Washington next week.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting. Meanwhile, Israeli attacks throughout Gaza have killed 160 more Palestinians, including those seeking food at US and Israel-backed aid distribution sites. Gaza's health authorities say the number of Palestinians killed has surpassed 56,000 since the conflict between Israel and Hamas broke out in October 2023. Severe fuel shortages have crippled the remaining hospitals in the enclave. Rami Al-Magari has more from Gaza.
More deadly Israeli airstrikes and bombardments have hit various parts of the Gaza Strip. The latest of those strikes hit the Al-Zawaida village in central Gaza Strip, as well as the Meghazi refugee camp, also close to the Zawaida in central Gaza Strip. Other strikes hit the Khan Yunis city and the western parts of Khan Yunis, mainly the Mawasi area. These deadly Israeli airstrikes come against the backdrop of more happenings regarding the starvation and hunger in Gaza, as the United Nations and more than 100 international humanitarian organizations have called for the halt of the operation of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is a U.S. NGO backed by the Israeli army, citing what these organizations suggest the killing of those seeking aid in different parts of Gaza. Also, this comes against the backdrop of reports that the Israeli army shooting are deliberate. That's according to the Israeli media Haaretz online newspaper. The Israeli army said it will reconsider the way these aids are delivered to the population of Gaza, and that there will be some kind of reorganization of the functioning of that humanitarian foundation that is backed by Israel.
That was Rami Al-Magari reporting. In North America, the U.S. Senate has passed President Donald Trump's tax and spending bill after over 24 hours of deliberation. The legislation now heads to the House of Representatives for final approval. Jim Spellman tells us more.
President Trump's massive legislative agenda passed the U.S. Senate by the tightest possible margin. Republicans could only afford to lose 3 votes, and that's exactly what happened. The final vote was 50-50, with Vice President J.D. Vance acting as tiebreaker. Now, the bill moves back to the House of Representatives, where a different version passed last month. President Trump wants the House to work quickly and get it on his desk to sign into law by Friday. The bill extends trillions of dollars in tax cuts, provides more funds for border enforcement and the military, while making cuts to the Medicaid health care plan for the poor and food assistance programs for needy families.
Republicans passed the biggest tax break for billionaires ever seen, paid for by ripping away health care for millions of people and taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids.
I think they're going to look at it and see that it's much less conservative than it started out to be, and it's going to add much more to the debt. And so I think without question, this is not a fiscally conservative bill. And if you're someone who thinks that debt is a problem, I don't see how you could vote for this now.
The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says the bill would add $3.3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. Getting this passed has created serious rifts within the Republican Party. Moderate Republican Congressman Don Bacon announced he won't seek re-election, citing dysfunction in Washington. Earlier, Senator Tom Tillis says he won't run for re-election after facing criticism and the threat of a primary challenge. And Elon Musk, who just a short time ago seemed to be Trump's right-hand man in the White House, opposes the bill so strongly that he's vowing to back primary challenges to Republican lawmakers who back the bill and threatening to start a third party, which could hurt Republicans in future elections. President Trump responded by threatening to revoke government subsidies benefiting Musk's companies.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies.
Trump even suggested he's open to deporting Musk, a naturalized U.S. citizen born in South Africa. So how will this impact average Americans? Well-off Americans will likely do just fine, and those who rely on tips or receive a substantial amount of overtime pay may see more money in their pockets. But lower-income Americans may see their tax burden go up. According to a CBO analysis before final tweaks to the bill, the highest 20% of households will see their income go up by about $7,500 a year. The lowest 20% of households will see their income reduced by about $700 a year. And more than 10 million people who rely on Medicaid will lose health insurance by the year 2034. These are some of the reasons the bill is unpopular, with a net unfavorability of 20% or more across multiple polls.
That was Jim Spellman in Washington, D.C. Over to Southeast Asia, where Thailand's Constitutional Court has launched an investigation into suspended Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra over allegations of ethical misconduct. Paetongtarn has 15 days to respond to the court. Josita Salkau explains the roots of the new crisis and what lies ahead for the country.
There's an all-too-familiar fault line in Thailand, one where law, legacy and legitimacy collide. The Constitutional Court's decision to suspend Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra from her duties, pending a court ruling on a petition seeking her ouster for alleged ethical violations, has sent ripples through a political landscape already marked by fragility and deep division.
Now it's in the deadlock. So opposition party also won the election, but they cannot press it too hard because in Thailand, protest not necessarily mean the step down of the government. It can be mean the political deadlock or can mean political vacuum that lead to the coup.
Her rise was swift, her lineage impossible to ignore. The Shinawatra name, powerful, polarizing and persistent, has never been just a surname. It embodies a 2-decade-long saga of populist politics, military interventions, exile and enduring loyalty, particularly from the rural masses. Her father Thaksin and her aunt Yingluck both ousted from office by military and judicial intervention. 38-year-old Paetongtarn was meant to represent a softer sequel, the heir who can modernize the brand and bridge old divides. Instead, her suspension reopens the wounds the nation never truly closed. Thailand has suffered from long stretches of political uncertainty in the past, but this current crisis has left Southeast Asia's second largest economy in a leadership vacuum, just as the country is facing serious economic challenges. It also raises doubts about whether Thailand can break free from this endless cycle of political turmoil.
It is very frustrating. There's no opportunity in this country. There's not so much opportunity in this country, unlike places where the political institutions are strong.
I'm worried because I think it might end up being the same cycle again, which means that another coup could happen.
Her party, Pheu Thai, elected on promises of economic revival and reconciliation, must now navigate a political minefield without its figurehead. Pat Tong Tan's suspension will severely test her government's resilience, but could also tip the fractured coalition into collapse. For now, the court has spoken. But for millions of Thais watching this political theatre on repeat, the real verdict is written elsewhere. On the streets, in the barracks, in ballot boxes. It's a nation stuck between election and intervention, vote and verdict.
That was Dusita Saukau in Bangkok. And finally to Europe. Scorching heat waves are gripping the continent, with countries including Italy, Greece and Switzerland issuing urgent heat alerts. France has closed more than 1,300 schools, while 16 regions, including Paris, remain under the highest level red alert for extreme heat. Ross Cullen reports from the capital.
Summer often brings heat waves, but France is currently in the grip of a record-breaking blast of hot air. Some parts of the country had their hottest June days on Monday, and it was also the hottest ever night in June anywhere in France.
It hasn't been too difficult, but today is the hottest day. We have portable fans, water, just staying in the shade, walking on the sidewalk on the shade, and ice cream.
Southern France is normally the hottest part of the country, and authorities have tried to adapt the city of Toulouse to the unrelenting heat.
In central Toulouse, with narrow shaded streets and the increasing number of trees, it's quite nice being able to walk under them. Also in the main capital square, they've hung lots of reflective blankets upside down to help cool certain areas a bit. So yes, stay hydrated and keep in the shade when you can.
The heat wave is due to a so-called heat dome of high pressure trapping hot air. The National Weather Service has put almost all the country under either an amber or a red alert for heat, calling on people to be extremely vigilant. Well, my apartment today was 30 degrees Celsius inside, and so there's no escaping the heat, even by staying indoors. And you only have to be out here for a couple of minutes to see just how unbearable this heat wave is. There is some relief in sight. Cooler days later this week, and from the 5th of July, the Paris authorities will allow public bathing in the River Seine for the first time in a century, after clean-up efforts linked to the 2024 Olympic Games.
That was Ross Cullen in Paris. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called on China and the European Union to achieve win-win cooperation. He made the remarks while meeting Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever in Brussels. Wang welcomed more Belgian enterprises to develop their businesses in China. The Belgian Prime Minister expressed his country's willingness to deepen exchanges with China. He also reaffirmed Belgium's support for a greater autonomous Europe. Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on a week-long trip to Europe, where he will also visit Germany and France. Li Jianhua has more from the Belgian capital.
He met Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever and had an hour-long closed-door meeting in the residence of Belgian Prime Minister. And right after that, we got the readout, and this is what we have learned so far. Wang Yi highlighted Belgium's unique position in the process of European integration and advancing China-EU relations. In the meantime, he expressed appreciation for what he called the rational and pragmatic approach adopted by the new government towards China. He also hoped that more Belgian companies would invest in China. In the meantime, he called for joint efforts effort to support multilateralism and act as an anchor in this uncertain world. And in response, Bart de Wever said there should be more communication and mutual understanding between China and the European Union in face of this growing geopolitical uncertainty. He also reaffirmed Belgium's commitment to multilateralism and support for Europe's strategic independence. Basically, this is what they talked about. De Wever is not new to China. He visited the country a couple of times, but not as the Prime Minister of the country, but as the Mayor of Antwerp, a rather wealthy region of Brussels, and he used to be quite business-driven and business-focused, but ever since he became the Prime Minister of the country not too many months ago, he has been adopting rather balanced approach towards China, while in the meantime calling for measures to protect the security interests of this country. Of course, in the coming days, and Wang Yi is expected to meet the Deputy Prime Minister of the country, who is also the Foreign Minister of Belgium, and after that he will also meet the President of European Council, Antonio Costa, before co-chairing the 13th round of China-EU high-level strategic dialogue with Kaya Kallas, who is the EU's foreign policy chief. And after his stop here in Brussels, he is expected to fly to Germany and France, the two top economies in the European Union.
There was Li Jianhua reporting. Recapping today's headlines, US President Donald Trump has urged Hamas to accept a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. The US Senate has passed President Donald Trump's tax and spending bill after over 24 hours of deliberation. Scorching heat waves are baking Europe, with many countries issuing urgent alerts. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Meng Zihang. Thank you for listening.